Hey there, and welcome to the Career Intelligence Podcast. I'm your host, Betsy Jewell. Today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, helping students bridge the gap between college and career. I'm joined by Dr. Amanda Pacheco, who oversees the leadership program at the University of Central Florida. With more than 25 years of experience spanning higher education, nonprofit leadership, corporate workforce development, and career development, she brings a unique perspective on preparing students for life after college. Mandy's held leadership roles across UCF, including the Office of Experiential Learning, and is a nationally recognized speaker on AI in education. She is also passionate about helping students connect what they're learning in the classroom to meaningful careers. In today's conversation, we discuss why internships and real-world experience matter more than ever, why your major doesn't define your future, how AI is changing higher education, and what employers are actually looking for in new graduates. We also dive into Mandy's Access Framework, an innovative approach to creating engaging and meaningful learning experiences in the age of AI. Whether you're a student, parent, educator, or employer, I think you'll walk away with practical advice and a lot of hope for the future of work. Now let's get started. I am super excited for today's conversation because I'm joined by Dr. Mandy Pacheco from the University of Central Florida. Dr. Pacheco works closely with students around leadership development, experiential learning, and helping young adults connect their education to meaningful career paths and real-world opportunities. Dr. Pacheco, or Mandy, as I know you, thanks so much for being here today.
I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, we go back a long time. I'm not even sure how long, but when our kids were little, and now they're not so little anymore. But I have always been a huge fan of you and your work, and I admire just the impact you're having on so many young lives. So let's talk a little bit to set the stage about the higher education landscape. What are you seeing in higher ed right now, and what's going on between learning and career readiness and all the things?
That's such a great question. And to start, I should say how much I admire your work as well. I think
Mm.
what you're doing in the career coaching sphere is absolutely essential. And I wish more students would take advantage of it, to be totally honest, and which kind of relates into some of what I'm seeing in higher education today. But it goes back to what I've seen in higher education all along. I started my journey in higher ed, I guess, professionally in 1998, 1999, something like that, the late 1900s, a million years ago now. And at that time, I actually started in career services. And so I was working with students, even back then, on figuring out what's next and how to get there and talking with employers, what they were looking for, and all of these kinds of things. And honestly, although things are different, they're still the same. Students
Mm.
then were concerned about what they were going to be doing afterward. They weren't quite sure. They're young, they're still experiencing things. At that time, we were still trying to get them out there to do the shadowing experiences, the internships, the talking with employers, all of these kinds of things, teaching them those skills. And I see the same things today, to be totally honest. And employers, too, even back then, they were asking for things like critical thinking and communication skills. And I remember I used to do a workshop on what do employers want. And I would pull data from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, NACE, which
Mhm.
is used today also to find out what employers are looking for. And back then, everybody was so surprised because technology was like number 7 out of 10 in terms of skills that they were looking for, right? And so again, today, now, even with AI, even with all these other things, technology skills are assumed at this point, at least base level technology skills. But the real clear winners are still teamwork and communication and critical thinking and all of those kind of what some people would call soft skills, other people call professional skills or necessary skills. But interestingly, it's not always the thing that's taught explicitly in colleges, even though that's the primary thing employers want.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm glad you brought that up. I've called them human skills, I've called them
Mhm.
survival skills, depending on who I'm talking to. But
Yeah.
some things change and some things stay the same. And that human piece of it continues to be critical as we're hearing from
Absolutely.
employers, as we're even starting to see in job descriptions. Not that they weren't there before, but I feel like companies, employers are starting to really press that as more a higher require or a more important requirement for job descriptions. So
Right.
before we talk about work, I'd like to talk about the work you do at UCF because I really believe that this is a model that other schools should really consider adopting. And I know easier said than done, me here in the cheap seats, but can you talk about how the programming and the curriculum that you're involved in, how did that get started? Where did that evolve from? And how did it become a priority?
So I manage the leadership program at UCF, and this program is housed within the School of Interdisciplinary Studies, which is found within the College of Community Innovation and Education. So if you can follow that
That's a
pathway,
lot. Yeah.
it is. But basically, the leadership program, we have a constellation of, starting in the fall, actually 9 different tracks. And so students can now earn a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor in Science in leadership with a technology track or an arts and entertainment track or a healthcare track, right? So we basically created this ecosystem where students are learning the core skills of leadership, which include explicitly a lot of those things that the employers are looking for that I mentioned before, the communication, the critical thinking, the teamwork, et cetera. With layered on top of that, some level of expertise within the industry that they're hoping to enter. And so we've created this program that is exceedingly flexible. There are actually only 4 core courses within the leadership program. They add on that level of expertise, that track, which is just a couple of more courses within an area. And then we also include a requirement for a high impact experience. And this could be anything from an internship to research to a service learning class or anything else that basically helps them to connect what they're doing in the classroom to the outer world. And then beyond that, the rest of their program is fully customized. We're calling it a customized learning pathway. Of course, they do have their GEP courses, their general education courses mixed in there, right? So all students, if they're getting a university 4-year degree, do have to take 12 classes in their sciences, their histories, math, et cetera, et cetera. But the customized learning pathway ends up being about half of their degree, approximately 60 credit hours. And so the reason we're doing that is because we're finding that students are not necessarily wanting to fit into hard and fast boxes, but rather they want this ability to really create the degree that's going to be most meaningful for them. And so within this customized learning pathway, we absolutely encourage minors and certificates and other ways of honing their expertise even further. And so, to give you an example, it might have a student who's doing leadership major, healthcare track minor with a, or a healthcare track with a minor in health services administration, because perhaps they're interested in med school, but they want to know a little bit more about the business area. They want to know a little bit about how it all works together. And so it just works to help students to create what they need. Now, for a student who is heading to med school or something like that, they of course also need deeper coursework in some of the biological sciences and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so again, with this customized learning pathway, they can do what they need to do in college to get them to whatever next step that is. Now, if you have a student who probably is the bigger case scenario where they are not quite sure what's next, it also gives them lots of time to explore. And so they can explore in a variety of ways, definitely through coursework, but also through potential internships. And so one of the unique pieces of the leadership program is that we allow up to 30 credits of internship credit to use in the program.
That is amazing. Talk about
Yeah. And we're
hands-on learning.
100%. And we're doing that for a variety of reasons, in part because we know that one of the things employers look for most is having hands-on experience, relevant hands-on experience within that industry. And so we want to give our students the best leg up there. But we also know that some students are working. We have in the leadership program about 40% of our students work full time, which is a huge percentage. We have
Wow.
about 85% of our students working at least part time. And I don't think that piece is that unusual across universities these days. Most students, just to make ends meet, need to work. And so what we're doing is we're allowing them this opportunity to gain college credit through their work experience. But the key is that the work experience has to be a learning experience too. And so, in order to make an internship not just the job, there's a couple of criteria. We need them to, at UCF anyway, register with the Office of Experiential Learning, which gives them a learning framework. They actually register into an online course where in the beginning of the semester, they come up with 3 learning objectives. So, what are 3 things that you actually want to learn from this experience? It does need to be a mentored experience. So, whether it's your supervisor or somebody, and it has to be something that they maybe have not tried before. So if a student is already working full time in an organization, but maybe they really want human resources, they haven't had that experience yet, they can talk with their supervisor about a project for that semester that maybe they can go work with the human resources department for X number of hours. And so depending on the number of hours they're working there, that equates to a number of hours, credit hours they can earn. They'll be getting a mentored experience, so they're not out on their own. They will be able to create those learning objectives. And then at the end of the semester, they reflect on it through either a research project or a portfolio where they basically put together everything that they have learned that semester. And so in a program like leadership, which is pretty broad, these kinds of experiences are really valuable because it shows to the employer that they take initiative and also that they've gotten some real world experience in this area.
I'm trying to find the words to say how amazing this is because it's so much to unpack here. First of all, I have so many questions. Is this happening at other colleges and universities? And is it similar? Is it different? Are you starting to see, there's certainly an appetite for it, both through students and through employers, but are you starting to see, and I know higher ed doesn't exactly move at a quick pace. So is it taking a long time to get this implemented in other, do you know of other schools?
That is such a great question. And I don't know that I can answer it with data just yet.
Yeah.
I know that there are other leadership bachelor's degree programs, though they are still somewhat rare. I'm part of an organization, a couple of organizations, but one is called the Association of Leadership Educators. And so all over the nation, there are people who teach leadership in various forms. But I also know that many of those programs are either co-curricular, so it's like an extracurricular kind of a situation, or it's a minor or a certificate or something like that, as opposed to an actual major in the area. And so I'd have to do a little bit of research to really see exactly what's happening there. And then also how those programs are structured. I know that sometimes leadership programs end up in the College of Business, which is not where we are. We're in the School of Interdisciplinary Studies, which by nature is very integrated. In interdisciplinary basically means the integration of a multitude of disciplines. So we pull from psychology and behavioral economics and philosophy and all of these kinds of things that help to really answer the tough, complex questions of leadership. Whereas sometimes schools who position it in the College of Business are really focused on somewhat of a different model. Our program is fully online. And so it allows people to come in from a variety of industries. If you're interested in nonprofit, you're interested in healthcare, you're interested in the public sector, your focus might not be on exactly the bottom line. And so there just might be some nuances there that's a little bit different about our program.
As someone who has a young adult who just graduated from UCF, the innovation I've seen going on at that school over the past 4+ years has been enormous. But how are you seeing adoption of this program? Are you getting a lot of enrollment?
Yes, as we're getting the word out, the students are very interested. But the big challenge, of course, UCF being very large, is there are so many wonderful resources and opportunities at UCF that sometimes it's difficult to really share the word. So I'm really pretty grateful for this opportunity.
Oh, I am beyond
come
thrilled.
On there and share with your audience.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to share it. Both for I hope educators listen and business folks listen and parents and students because there's just value for everybody. So let's
Appreciate
talk
that.
about students who don't have access to a program like this or who do.
Sure.
How should they be thinking about college beyond the classes and the grades, right? Let's dial it back a little bit. So you said something earlier about helping them gain clarity and learn about career paths and what they want to do and all the things. I do so much of that work in my career coaching because there's college seniors or recent grads and they come to me and they say, I got my degree in X. I have no idea what I want to do with it or how to apply it. And they don't have a network and they don't have the experience. And because nobody really told them to or encouraged it, let's put it that way, or
Hmm.
they encouraged them and they didn't listen. So I kind of want to start with like freshman year or even before. What kind of advice do you have for students to begin their college career, but also throughout those 4 years?
Absolutely. You can't blame the students really. They're coming in and
Mhm.
they've come out of X number of years of traditional structured school where often there may be a little bit of choice in electives, but not a lot.
Mhm.
And so much of what they've been coming out of is very prescribed for them. And then they get to college and it's the world is your oyster. Pick what you want. And it's, I
Right.
don't know. And so if they haven't done any kind of exploration work, self awareness work, self assessment work prior to coming to college, that's really the first step is to figure out specifically what are my interests? What are my skills? What are my values? What's my personality like? Introvert, extrovert? Do I think big picture versus more details? All of these pieces. And then also, what do I like to do for fun? If I'm just scrolling TikTok or wherever I am, what kind of content am I just naturally drawn to? And so I think really thinking through those big questions, which are very big questions, is really the first step. It's this kind of self assessment piece. And from there, the exploration can start, right? And sometimes it happens together. It just depends what opportunities a student has. But by exploration, I mean figuring out what's out there. So we got to know who we are and we've got to know what's out there to kind of try to find that Venn diagram of what's going to bring satisfaction, bring meaning, kind of what we're looking for. And some ways to do that exploration include shadowing opportunities. A lot of schools offer shadowing opportunities, internships, of course, but a lot of times those shadow opportunities can turn into those internships, right? And also something called informational interviews, which I know that you've encouraged in your practice and you may have talked about on this podcast, but basically getting out there and just having a one on one with someone who's doing the thing you're thinking might be interesting to do and finding out what the day to day really looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big proponent of informational interviews. And I think the young adults, younger generation, that I've heard it's so cringe to do that, right? To reach out to somebody and bother them. I'm like, you're not bothering them. People like to help those coming up behind them. It's very
Yeah.
rare. I say this all the time. It's very rare. And nobody will reject you. They'll just ignore your email or whatever it might be,
Yes.
right? So that's great advice. And I love the internship advice too. And I've been talking a lot about this on my LinkedIn and even in the podcast, but internships have become the holy grail. If you're lucky enough to get one, hooray. But I've
Absolutely.
really been encouraging those alternate, to your point, shadowing might turn into something. I have clients pitching work directly, a project directly to a small business within
Yeah.
their sphere of influence and saying, hey, just give me a couple weeks this summer and I can do this. Just because it gives them what I keep referring to and other people do as proof of work. So
Yes.
demonstrate to those employers that you have the skills, that you know how to use them, that you can articulate them.
And that's one of the reasons that internships is so successful in turning into full-time work later on is because much of the reason employers use internships is as a recruitment pipeline. It's a try before you buy kind of situation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so they're actually using this to test these students to see can you do the thing that I hope you can do.
Right.
And so it really does make a difference. I can tell you that long ago, I think I shared my first career, my first professional career. was as the assistant director of career services for a very small private school. And so this was, again, back in the late 1900s. And at the time, the statistic was, and I don't know how this has changed, but I imagine it's actually only gotten worse, is that 1 out of every 200 resumes would get you that job versus 1 out of 12 informational interviews got you a job offer. And so nowadays, with AI and so much flooding the market and everything, I have to think that 1 out of 200 is probably 1 out of 500 or 1 out of 700, something like that. But the informational interview is still one of these things that most students don't take the time to do, whether they think it's cringe, whether they think it's just not going to work, whether it's just scary. They're not taking the time to do it, but it's still so powerful because that most students don't take the time to do it. The ones who do really show up looking well.
Okay, so beyond freshman year, as we start to get further in, even sophomore, junior year, what should you be doing differently, and what do you think students should be focusing on at that point? Because also by the summer after sophomore year, you have to declare a major, right? So if you haven't,
Sure.
how do you help them get there?
Sure. So again, UCF's large school, tons of resources. We actually have a whole office dedicated to helping students figure out what their next steps are. There's career services, which is like later steps, but there's also the major transition center that will actually sit down with students and help them figure that out.
Okay,
But
I'm sorry, this is news to me. How do I not know that?
Oh, no.
Okay, good. Glad to hear it.
Yeah, I think the acronym is KMETC, at least it used to be, unless they changed. And I think it stands for Night Major Exploration and Transition Center.
Okay.
And so there you go.
Okay.
Plug for that office because they do great work too. But yeah, but how they start is the self-assessment stuff. So if you're thinking about changing majors, we need to do some self-assessment, figure out who you are and what you are. If you're thinking about next steps after college, we need to do some self-assessment, figuring out who you are and what you are, right? It always starts there. So it's less you should do this freshman year, you should do this sophomore year, junior year, senior year. It's more of a start where you are and go from there. And so if you start freshman year, obviously you have the most opportunity to do more of this stuff, right? If you're waiting till the top of your senior year or whenever it is, and I got to get a major now. And so you're just starting junior year with some of the self-awareness, self-assessment stuff. It just leaves you less time to explore, which is the next step in that process, right? And yeah, I would just say wherever you are, start there. But the first step is always self-assessment. And you can do that at UCF, at least through the KMETC or through career services. But after that, it's all about exploration. If you're still figuring it out, that's the shadowing. At UCF, there's something called the Night Shadow Program, which offers you an opportunity to, during your school break, get in with an organization of your choosing, which is really cool. They give a 1 or 2 day experience there. But if not shadowing, then internships and informational interviews that, of course, you can do on your own.
Great. I'm going to say this again, and this is not a dig at UCF, but this stuff needs to be promoted better. These programs, I am a very involved parent, and oh, by the way, I live in this space, and I was not aware of a lot of that. So this is all really good to know.
And again, if you speak to the people who work in these programs, they're saying we're sending the emails, we're sending the announcements. I think now, to be fair, they send them to the students. Primarily, as opposed to the parents, right? Because at this point, students
they're
adults are
adults.
18 and up, and it has to fall into their laps, right? But I will say, to your point, I think you're right that in many cases, the parents can help kind of, hey, don't forget, did you see that thing? So it might be nice to bring them in the loop as well. But I think things get lost as far as there's just so much information coming at all of us all the time. We get how many emails a day?
Yeah, it's true.
Just hard. It's just hard.
Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit to a very controversial topic. As we've witnessed in recent commencement ceremonies, when the topic of AI is mentioned, the big ugly elephant in the room, we're hearing booing and dissatisfaction, which is a whole other podcast episode entirely. But I want to talk about learning and motivation in the age of AI, because it's here, it's not going anywhere, and how is it impacting learning? And you have a framework that you use, is that right?
Correct. So, yeah, it's a challenging topic. It's something that honestly, I think took all of us by surprise, at least in how fast this
Mhm.
juggernaut of a thing came on the market,
Yeah.
came into our view. I was somewhat fortunate in that I got an early peek into AI, earlier than the majority, I would say. Because of some of the classes I was teaching at the time, I taught a class where students got to choose their own research topic and go deep in it. And because I have a number of students who are non-traditional out there in the working world, one of my students was a mid-career technology guy who did his research project on AI. And this was several years ago, before probably about 8 to 12 months prior to ChatGPT becoming everywhere.
Right.
And so he asked me this question. He shared his project. We were talking about the topic, and he told me about ChatGPT before I had heard of it because his organization was working in it. And he said, "What are you going to do? What are all teachers going to do when AI is writing your student reports?"
Hmm.
And I looked at him and I was like, "That's an excellent question. I have no answer because I don't know." This was before. Remember, this was
Yeah.
2022, 23, whatever it was, right before. And so it was very interesting, but that certainly caused me to do a deep dive into, okay, what is this thing? What are its capabilities? And holy cow, he's right. It
Hmm.
absolutely can shift everything, right? And students, like in many cases, are frustrated by AI because they're they're seeing it from some of the headlines, like AI is
Hmm.
taking jobs and all of this kind of stuff, right? And then, particularly for the artists in the room, what does that mean for their work? And if there's a lot of implications around it. There's some environmental concerns. There's a lot with it
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
students are concerned about. At the same time, I think it also offers opportunity for people to go beyond the base level of entry level jobs to actually use some more critical thinking skills and creativity. And that's actually what we're seeing in some of the forecasting reports now coming out, particularly from National Association of Colleges and Employers, which surveys thousands of employers across all industries. They're seeing that although there was a slight dip this year in hires, starting fall 26 and beyond, they're actually looking at an increase in hires in for entry level hires, which is a very encouraging. And more so, those hires are going to be at a different higher, right? Higher level of competence, if you will, because AI can take care of a lot of those sort of rote things that the
Hmm.
entry level folks might have been doing before. And so now they're actually going to be asked more complex questions and solving more complex issues and all of this kind of stuff. So I think it's a process. It's new for everyone. Everyone's trying to figure it out. And so it's change is scary in general, and we don't know what to expect. And
Right.
so I think there's with any new thing, when the internet came on the market, like I remember people talking about this is a place of business. I'm not going to use the internet, which is
Right.
just so funny now, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's an evolution, and I
Hmm.
think as time goes on, it will continue. But in terms of a framework, so because I had that kind of early inkling that this thing is coming, it's given me an opportunity to really start thinking carefully. How am I going to design my classes? Not necessarily to be AI proof, but to ensure the most learning that comes from these opportunities, from these classes. Because I recognize that students are very busy. Like I said, many of my students work, most of my students work. They have family responsibilities. Some are caretakers. There's just so much that students are expected to do these days, in addition to the full time class load that they're taking,
Hmm.
right? And I teach fully online. And so if anybody is going to quote unquote cheat with AI, it's easy to do with online stuff where everything is just written reports or reflections or whatever it is. Kind of to summarize where I've gone with this, I've created a framework that I call access. And access, each of the letters stand for a different thing. A stands for autonomy. And I'll just share a little bit about each one to give you a sense of it.
Yeah.
Autonomy. I believe strongly that students need to choose what they're learning and how they're learning. I think that really helps to promote motivation, and it everybody learns differently. And so if there is some level of choice in what you're learning, it's just a little bit easier to actually want to do the thing that you've got to do. And so, an example of that, for instance, in my classes, a lot of times I'll give them, if it's a reflection, I'll say, you can either video this, create a vlog, or you can write it if you're more of a writer. Go ahead and, because for me, I'm not teaching writings per se. I
Mm-hmm.
want the information, I want the reflection, I want the deep thinking. And so, autonomy, give them choice.
Love.
Connection, that's the first C. I believe in getting to know my students one on one. Every student is in a different position. They all have different backgrounds and they all have different goals. And so if I'm not connected with each one, that leaves a hole there. I want them connected with each other too. I use a specific tool called Yellow Dig for my discussions. And Yellow Dig is very different than the traditional online discussion board. There's no more of this post once and answer this question and respond to two classmates, which is very kind of structured and stilted. And I don't know anybody that likes it, honestly. Yellow Dig is more social media based. I throw topics up and they can talk about whatever they want to talk. And sometimes that means they're sharing pet pictures with each other. And that's okay, right?
Right.
But most of the time, it means that if something happens in the news or something happens in their real world, but we happen to talk about it 2 or 3 weeks ago, they can bring it up and they can say, did you guys hear about this thing that just happened? What do you think? And they have these real conversations around the stuff that's related to our class and related to stuff that's really happening in their lives. And so they connect with each other through that. And it's all gamified. It's points based for participation. And so if you post something really cool and other people respond to it, you earn more points because you're posting engaging content. If you throw a video on, you earn even more points, that kind of stuff. And so it connects them in a way that's more similar to what they're used to with Instagram and some of these other social media type tools. And so it's just more relevant too. So the connection piece between me and them and between each other, I think is really important.
Sure.
And the other thing that promotes, I think, is if a student knows that the professor really knows them, they don't want to disappoint. And so that often acts as a protector against just using AI because they know we're going to have a conversation at some point. I'm going to ask you about this thing that you talked about. And when you're connected with someone, you don't want to let them down.
Yeah, you're building you're building trust and respect, and they want you to be happy, pleased with their work.
Absolutely. Yes. So autonomy, connection, confidence. That's where I know there is a sweet spot. You don't want to make things too easy, right? Because then it's just boring and what's the point? But you also don't want to make it so challenging, whether it's the reading or the assignments or whatever, that they just give up and they say, forget this. This is just, I can't possibly understand this stuff. So I believe in a lot of scaffolding. And again, that goes back to connection, knowing your students, right? With some, I might have to scaffold a little more. With others, I always promote some extra stuff so that if I have a C-level executive in my class, which sometimes I get because I have students of all backgrounds, I can still teach them and I can still take from where they are forward, right? But I certainly wouldn't want to throw this super nuanced stuff at a 22-year-old, right? And so it's just finding that sweet spot. That's where the confidence comes in. And so that's a piece that I think as instructors, we need to think about where are our students going to feel that confidence and then be able to move forward from there. Engagement is the E in access. And that basically just means I like making it fun. You can't throw the same thing, same kind of assignment, read this thing, take a quiz, move on. That's not engaging. And so I put things like memes in my classes, like where students are using the material and creating their own. And then in one class, I actually have a meme war in the middle of the semester where they rate each other's and the one who gets the highest points for either funniest or most insightful or whatever actually gets a couple of bonus points, right? Things like that. One of my classes is themed Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and which is little Easter eggs throughout. It's just making it engaging. You have to have a similar structure from week to week so that the students aren't lost and confused. But each within that week, they're going to be doing something a little bit different. One week you might do an infographic. Another week you might do a poster thing. Whatever it is, make it engaging. Significant stuff has to be meaningful. That's the first S in access. Make it meaningful to their lives, whether they can use it in their personal lives, their professional lives. Help make that connection and make it meaningful. It has to be significant for them to want to take the time to do the work, right?
Yeah.
And then finally, support. My students know that I'm there for them. If they email me, they will get a response typically that day. If they have something going on in their lives, if their loved one is hospitalized, if they're hospitalized, if whatever it is, they're having a really anxious, panicky week, talk with me about it. I'll try. A lot of times I make adjustments. There's some flexibility there. I will say that my classes are capped at 35. So different than some in the university, which may be a lot bigger. And so I can do this stuff a little bit more easily. But I think even when you have a larger class, there are systems that we can put in place that kind of take this access framework into account that really helps students to understand that they have choice, that they are connected with me and one another. They are confident, they are competent to do the work, they're engaged, things are meaningful, they have that significance, and ultimately they're supported in their journey.
Okay, I'm going to enroll in some of your classes today. I don't know how you do it. How do you fit this all in and do all the work that you're doing? And oh, by the way, all the millions of things that are not student facing, because I know in higher ed, everybody's spread too thin, and it's just a beautiful thing, the way you're teaching and engaging. And
I really appreciate it. You know me, I love my students and
I
I
know you
love
do.
my job. When you talk about your own personal work values, one of mine is actually independence and autonomy. And so I'm able to try these different things and experiment and see what works. And sometimes I try something that doesn't work, right? And okay, so let's try something different the next semester, right?
Yeah.
But I ask a lot of questions of my students because I'm connected with them. They have opportunities to do anonymous surveys throughout the semester, not just at the end, so that if something's not working, I can change it midstream. It's a lot. Honestly, it's leadership skills. One of the things that in leadership we talk about is modeling the way. And so I feel like one of my responsibilities is to be a good model of a leader. And so I try to, throw these things in and make that explicit for my students. But yeah, it's a labor of love because I really enjoy what I do and I really care about my students. And once you get to know them as people, as individuals, you can't not.
Yeah.
These are real people's lives and
Yeah.
you want to make it meaningful.
Yeah, that's how I feel about my coaching clients. I tell them all, like, I'm so invested in their
Yeah.
future and I'm so hopeful for them and I'm cheering them on even long after we work together because there's just that attachment. So you and I could go on for a very long time, and maybe you'll come back again and we can have another conversation because there's so many things we didn't get to. But I want to give you a couple of, not rapid fire, but a couple quick questions just to wrap it up.
Okay.
What's one thing every student should do before graduating?
We'll think that through just a little bit.
Yeah.
If possible, I think a lot of people are saying this, internship.
Mm-hmm.
If possible. I know that it seems like there's not enough to go around.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, experience of some sort, maybe I should broaden the answer. Experience of some sort. So if it's not a formal internship, then like what you suggested with kind of creating your own project opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, employers really want to see not just a pretty word on a resume, but show me the money, show me what you've actually done with this thing. I was just talking to an employer not too long ago, and his first question it was a technology student, was, what's the biggest project you've done?
Mm-hmm.
And that can come out of classwork, certainly, but it can also come out of opportunities that they've gotten out there.
Yeah. And micro-internships, I did a whole episode with Jeffrey Moss over at Parker Dewey, and I keep beating this micro-internship drum. I'm like, it is so accessible for everybody. It's remote. They're short-term paid work experiences. Don't sleep on those. Those are so important. So what do you think? What's one myth about career success you wish students would stop believing? I have a whole list, but you go.
For that one, I would say that your major dictates your career. I think that there are certain majors, certainly, that you need XYZ major in order to get in. The one in particular is nursing, because you have to pass the NCLEX. In order to take the NCLEX, in order to get licensed, right, you have to have those nursing classes. And so there are certain ones that you absolutely need XYZ major, but most are not like that.
Mm-hmm.
By 95% are not like that. And even if you have a traditional major that has been around for a long time, marketing, for instance, what are you going to do with that? Marketing is a huge field. You can have dozens and dozens of different job titles within marketing. You've got market research, you've got marketing assistant, you've got salesperson, all these different things. And then you multiply that by the dozens and dozens of industries out there. Marketing in a bank looks very different than marketing for a sports team.
Right.
And even if you have a kind of a major that seems, oh, I'm going to do marketing, that doesn't actually give you what you wanted. And then what if you decide, you know what, instead of marketing, I'm a marketing major, but actually I really like this finance stuff. You can switch. That's okay. Employers are looking at your experience much more than they're looking at your major that's coming through. And so that's where in leadership, what am I going to do with this? What do you want to do with this? It's anything you want. And that's a blessing and a curse.
Right.
Because often that's the hardest question. What do I want to do with this? Right.
Yes. It can be overwhelming, as I find.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. But I think that's one of the biggest myths is that you have to figure it out at moment go. You're a junior. Now I need a major. And that's going to determine the rest of your career. And it's just not like that.
True. Very true. So we hear a lot of people say, oh, this generation. Now you work with lots of different generations in the teaching that you do, but particularly Gen Z. They're lazy. They're entitled. They're insert adjective here.
Sure.
I say, no, they're not. They're struggling. They're overwhelmed. They're trying. And I believe they're going to change the world. What gives you hope about this generation?
Sure. I'll say that every generation is dogged by the one that came before. In the 50s, the fact that we were moving our hips and dancing to rock and roll, what is with this generation, right? And so every generation, the elders are like, oh my gosh, the world is going to hell in a handbasket.
Yes.
It's always like that. So here we are again, right? But for Gen Z particularly, I'm seeing a group of people, and it's so hard to mention whole thousands and thousands of people, but I see people who value authenticity. I see people who value meaning. It's not just enough to get a job. They actually want to get a job that they care about and they feel like they are making a difference.
Absolutely.
And I love that. I see a generation who isn't afraid necessarily to question authority, which I think also some of the older generations were going, I'm the boss. What are you doing? But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I teach my own kids. I have a 17 and 19-year-old. I teach my own kids. It's okay to question, but do it with respect, of course, but lead with curiosity. That's a good thing because sometimes there are things that should be changed. And just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean we should continue to do it this way. And so I think questioning authority is actually something that can help push us forward as a society. I see this generation being very collaborative. They want to work with their peers. They want to get to know their peers as people, not just as coworkers, and they care deeply. I think all of these things together is really positive. And certainly I think there are professional skills to be learned. Right now, I'm actually putting together a thing about professionalism, what that means, doing what you say you'll do, showing up on time, all of these kinds of things. But I think that's true for a lot of generations, for all the generations too, that we need to teach these skills. They need to learn these skills. That's okay. But I think at the core, I think the kids are going to be all right. And I think as a society, we're doing okay.
I agree 100%. Oh, this was such a good conversation. So, where can people learn more, contact you, reach out, all the things?
Sure. So I put a website together. It's my professional website. It's www.mandypacheco.com.
Okay.
So Mandy with a Y. And so you can find out a little bit more about me and some of my work, my research, my service, et cetera, all there, my teaching. Certainly at UCF, there's the School of Interdisciplinary Studies is the big program for which I work. It's the leadership major. So if anybody is interested there, certainly they can contact either me directly, amanda.pacheco@ucf.edu, or just reach out to the school in general and they'll be able to give you some more information.
Okay. I will put the links in the show notes so everybody can find them.
Awesome.
You're the best. Thank you so, so much.
I appreciate this opportunity. This was a fun conversation. We went to a lot of different places. I really appreciate everything that you're doing to kind of spread the good word about how students can be most successful, how parents can support them, and just all of these good things. These are important conversations to have, and I'm just thrilled to be part of it. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the Career Intelligence Podcast.
One of the things I loved most about this conversation with Mandy is that it reinforces something I've believed for a long time. Career success isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to explore, stay curious, build real experiences, and make thoughtful decisions along the way. Whether you're a student trying to choose a major, a college senior wondering what's next, or a parent trying to support your young adult, I hope this episode reminds you that there isn't just one right path. Your major doesn't define your future, and you don't have to have your entire career figured out at 18 or even 22. What matters is continuing to learn about yourself, explore opportunities, and taking intentional steps forward. If you or someone you know is feeling stuck or overwhelmed by career decisions, I'd love to help. My self-discovery and career exploration coaching program is designed specifically for high school seniors, college students, and young adults who want more clarity, confidence, and direction before making important career decisions. Together, we'll identify your strengths, interests, aptitudes, values, and work preferences so you can make informed choices about majors, careers, internships, and your future. You can learn more about my coaching at betsyjewellcoaching.com, and you'll find a link in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with a student, parent, educator, or anyone who cares about preparing young adults for the future of work. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious, continue learning, and keep building your career intelligence.
Forward.